Okay, we are recording and we are streaming. So you're set to go.
Perfect, thank you. And welcome everyone here and everybody watching to this meeting of the South Kingstown Town Council. This is the work session before our regular session, which will begin at 7:30. We do have a couple interviews this evening. I believe I saw at least one of our interviewees here. Carol Vetter, who would like to be a member of the South Kingstown Schools Board of Trustees. If we could bring her into the meeting, that'd be great. All right, Carol, you have been brought in now. You are muted at the moment. You're now unmuted.
Okay.
Now we can see you. Great. Welcome. And thank you, of course, for willing to throw your hat in the ring for this position. Why don't you tell us sort of what intrigued you about this particular board and what skills you think you'll bring to it?
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have a background in finance and accounting. I have an MBA from the University of California at Davis and an undergraduate degree in management science from the University of California, San Diego. I'm originally from California. That's why I went to school out there. So I've worked in corporate accounting and finance. And most recently, I am a tax advisor. I also serve on other charitable boards. I serve as the treasurer for Gear Productions. I am the vice chair of the board of Peacedale House, and I'm currently the president of Peacedale Congregational Church, where I help manage their endowment, which is about 1.3 million. So I have a lot of financial experience and experience managing endowment funds.
I forgot to unmute myself there. So other questions for Carol from council members? Carol, have you been following, I mean, somewhat of a sleepy board. We don't hear a lot from the Board of Trustees at the council level often. Do you have any sort of goals, sort of wishes for what the board would do going forward?
Well, I think fiscal management of public monies is very important. So I hope I can be helpful in the management of these funds. I did look up the various funds that they oversee, and you know, some are small and some are very large, but they're all important. And I think you know, being a fiduciary of and having the public trust is very important. I would just try to do a very, you know, due diligence in any work I did.
All right, any other questions for Carol tonight? All right, seeing none, I'll ask a question that we would ask habitually of interviewees in the past. Would you be interested in serving on any other board in the town? Or is this sort of your dream job?
Well, I think this one matches my talents very well. The other one that I have a great interest in is affordable housing. I do sit on the board of Peacedale House, which is a HUD property at affordable housing. So one day I might look into that board because of my interest in that area as well.
Very good. All right, well, I'll open up one more chance for any final questions. Seeing none, thank you for coming forward. I believe you should hear shortly.
All right, well, thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Carol.
Muted myself again. I do not see our other interviewee at the moment. Have we confirmed that we'll be seeing Mari?
He did confirm with me that he would attend tonight.
Okay.
I
Well,
can try and email him if you want and just make sure that he didn't lose the link or something.
yeah, if you want to ping him, that would be great. And then
Okay.
in the meantime, we can sort of begin to talk about the agenda. Right?
All right, so it's a relatively light agenda. The main items on the agenda, the big items are, excuse me, a new business item dealing with seeking legislative approval to submit a bond referendum question to the voters. We need to go to the state legislature and seek the authority to put a bond referendum question before the public. That is item, excuse me, 11E on the agenda tonight. Other major items to be dealt with tonight include an update on the vaccine distribution and an update on and discussion around snow removal. If there's any other items on the agenda that folks would like to have any questions to, I'm happy to answer any questions folks have got.
We did get that question or the communication regarding distribution of a vaccine to the Peacedale House.
Yep.
But I imagine there's other, vulnerable,
We've had on average about 600 phone calls a day coming into town hall and the senior center. We've had a lot of questions coming from members of the public. Peacedale House has actually been contacted. We've, even before that email actually, had already scheduled everyone over the age of 75. And all but everybody at Peacedale House who was eligible for the vaccine was offered the vaccine. I think we had 2 refusals, but everybody at Peacedale House who could have gotten the vaccine because they were 75 years or older was given that opportunity. The state of play with regard to vaccine is this. The state of Rhode Island has established 3 channels for the distribution of vaccine. The first channel they're calling the State Department of Health vaccine centers. The second channel is private pharmacies. There will be 3 state centers, and right now there are about 14 pharmacies, private pharmacies around the state of Rhode Island that are distributing vaccine. Actually, what they're doing at this point is taking registrations for appointments. The third channel are the PODs, the points of distribution at the regional level. There are 5 regional PODs. One of them is the South Road School. That POD has been very much involved in the distribution for 75 and older persons. And because there is not an online registry, and because folks were concerned about whether or not that population would be well served by an online registration mechanism, those are phone calls being made to that population. We're probably not going to see phone calls being made to other groups, but for the first sort of part of this rollout, we are making phone calls. And at this point, we have distributed 150 vaccines at South Road School for South Kingstown residents. More than that for obviously the other regional communities. Narragansett has received their doses and Charlestown has received their doses. We've received 150 for South Kingstown residents. We have a population over 75 years of age, totaling about 2,900 persons. So the 150 is not anywhere near what's necessary for our over 75 population. So far, we are somewhere in the upper 90s in terms of working backwards from the oldest resident to the youngest. We have 210 vaccine doses coming next Wednesday and another 210 the Wednesday after that. So to get to 2,900 people at this rate, it would take us 8 to 10 weeks. But we're not the only channel. The state distribution sites, the state vaccine centers will be coming online in the next week or 2. And CVS and Walgreens are ramping up their efforts in Rhode Island. So there's other ways for folks to get the vaccine, and we're hoping that we will be able to cover most 75-plus-year-old residents very within the next month or so. Now, the state, aside from those 3 channels, has a sort of rollout schedule, if you will, working from the oldest to the youngest. It is 75 plus, 70 to 74, 65 to 70. And at that point, you're also bringing in everybody 65 to 16 who has a pre-existing condition, and then 50-year-old to 59-year-olds. Doesn't quite work, but 59 to 64 perhaps, 50 to 64 perhaps. Those will be rolling out and coming into eligibility over the course of the next couple of months. So you'll have 3 channels and rolling eligibility. That's what we know. That's the state of affairs. The whole thing is very contingent upon the amount of vaccine that's made available from the federal government. My expectation going forward is that the second channel, the private pharmacy channel, will become the biggest and the most significant for a number of reasons. There's more pharmacies than there are state centers and regional centers. And they also have the wherewithal. They have the information systems that deal with medical conditions or medical information. We do not. We cannot safeguard health information, so we should not be and have not been taking information on people's health conditions. The idea of having town employees responsible for keeping confidential information about everyone's health status is it's nerve-wracking. We're not likely to be in that business. Further, the private pharmacies also have the experience. They do vaccines every year. They do flu vaccines every single year, so they're experienced in doing it. It's also the preferred channel, and the federal government seems to be aiming states toward that model. So I think what we're going to see is over the next couple of months, the private pharmacies will become the most important channel for distribution of vaccine.
All right. Thank you for that update. All right. Anything else to highlight on the agenda, or you just want to open it up? I don't see Murray yet.
Yeah, so I will just come back to a topic that we had started sort of touching on before we got into the work session, and that is snow removal and the snow ordinance. We've received a lot of calls, both pro and con, folks who are concerned about pretty much every aspect and have pretty much every version of concern around snow removal as you can imagine. We've had folks call in and say the town should do this. It's really an obligation of the town to make sure that every sidewalk is clear so that we can, move about. We've had folks calling in who say the town shouldn't be making me clear snow from a town sidewalk or from a state sidewalk. We've had folks express particular concern about sidewalks to critical areas such as the Central Business District in Wakefield. We've had concerns about pathways to schools. We've had concerns expressed about the bike path. There's lots and lots of snow complaints at this point. We've had 2 significant, one really large snowstorm, and they've both been long duration snows, which is particularly problematic for the town because it means that our crews are out on the road for a long period of time. And under Department of Transportation regulations and OSHA regulations, we've got to pull those guys out of the cycle, which you'll remember was part of the rationale for the snow ordinance to begin with. We simply don't have enough crew to be plowing the roads and then continue on to make sure that all of the sidewalks are plowed or snow shoveled or snow blown. So this has been a challenging couple of storms, and there clearly are places where we don't have an ideal circumstance. I was just down on the bike itself about an hour ago, looking up, looking at the conditions down there, and it's been plowed, but there are patches of packed snow and ice because this was a serious storm, and you can't get to bare pavement everywhere. It's not going to be a condition that tomorrow morning the resident who called and was concerned that she wouldn't be able to push her 1-year-old in the stroller while bringing her 5-year-old to school. It's not a set of conditions that's going to be ideal for that parent. It's problematic. On the other hand, it was plowed, and I have to say, I think it was plowed to a competent standard. I think that the crew did what they could do there. Without sanding or salting, it's going to be what it is in the morning. We don't sand and we don't salt on the bike path because sand and salt tend to be a hazard to bicyclists. So, you know, if you sand or you salt, we're going to have people wiping out on their bikes, not just during the snow or just after the snow, but for days and weeks afterwards. So there's a number of challenges that come up with snow removal, and I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight. I'm happy to share, you know, the insights that folks have put forward. We have been making a list of recommendations on changes that we'd make to the snow ordinance. Clearly, Broad Rock is a particularly weird, peculiar situation because there are a number of private property owners who abut that, but who do not really face Broad Rock. And so that's a peculiar situation. We have plowed that road or that sidewalk because, you know, we recognize that the private property owners who are in the neighborhood that abuts but doesn't really face that road, we're in a difficult situation. You'd have to climb over the stone wall in order to get to that sidewalk to shovel it, and that's not really a reasonable thing to expect.
Rob, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Sure.
as of 4 o'clock, Broad Rock Road sidewalks were not done. I received a phone call from someone saying that she was going to have to be late to work tomorrow because she was going to have to drive her children in because it was not safe for them to walk to school at Broad Rock on the sidewalks there.
We did it the last snowstorm. The first snowstorm of the season, we did not. We got complaints. It was a light snowstorm and cleared pretty quickly. So we did do it at the last snowstorm, and it is on our list. It will be done as soon as the crews can get to it this storm. Unfortunately, we do not have enough personnel to do this. And in fact, last night we had a particular problem, which we will be addressing, but we had a particular problem in that 3 folks who normally do snow plowing were not available for snow plowing. So we were shorthanded for our crews last night. In fact, the director of Public Works, John Schock, was in a truck plowing roads last night because he's a licensed driver to do so. But we were not manned appropriately last night, given the storm we had. So yes, there are challenges around this, and we get to these things slower sometimes than folks would like. The woman who called about the bike path in Peacedale called because she had noticed that it wasn't done late in the day, and I had driven by it, I don't know, about 2 o'clock, and it had not been done. So I was concerned. I went down to see because she had indicated it still hadn't been done. It has, but it is a slow response time. There's no doubt. There's a lot of snow to be removed, and there's a lot of road and a lot of sidewalk to deal with.
So my question has to deal with the people who get exemptions. So what's the process for that? Because if they get an exemption, who's going to be taking care of their sidewalk? And then the second thing is people are upset because the community knows we have this ordinance, and then they see something not done. And now we have people, you know, shaming people, and you know, that's not the intent of the ordinance. You know, we don't need a community of citizens policing other citizens and wondering why they're not doing X or Y. And I just think that the process for all of that needs to be better communicated to the community, because, you know, there's a senior who's like, I don't have the ability to do that. and then people go, why isn't that get done? And they point it out, and it just creates a cycle. So the exemption process, and how do we
Sure.
educate the
So-
community?
So the exemption process is really just a matter of sending a letter and explaining the basis for the exemption. And there are exemptions that are sort of temporary in nature as well. If you can't get to your snow shoveling because of a work obligation, you're a nurse and the storm happened when you were on a 24-hour shift or something, you can get a temporary exemption. But generally speaking, the exemption is for physical inability or age. If you're 62 years of age, you can write in a letter, send us a letter, and we will exempt you. They're automatic exemptions. There's no evaluation of any criteria other than those listed in the ordinance, and the exemption is granted. We keep track of those exemptions, and we try to follow up. Now, what I've just been describing is the inability, because there aren't enough men who work and women who work for the town government, to get to even the roads we know we need to take care of ourselves. So the one-off exemptions are particularly problematic. When you have 20-foot or 30-foot section of sidewalk off on High Street all by itself, that's going to be a very late in the process thing for us to take care of. We're gonna get all of Broad Rock before we get that. We're gonna get all of the priority sidewalks on the loop in Wakefield before we get to that High Street one-off. But we do try to cycle back and get all of the properties that are exempt after we've taken care of the priorities and after we've taken care of those that aren't priorities but need to be done. The ones that we'd like to see cleared but aren't the highest priority. They're not the loop. The loop is identified by the Director of Public Works every.
Rob, just
Yep.
can I stop you, because we need to have this other interview as well. And
Sure.
we'll discuss this during the meeting. Definitely want to talk about the loop. So Susan, if you could bring in Murray Gates at this point, that'd be great. All right, Murray, you are here with us. You just need to unmute yourself, and if you want to be seen, you can click on the little video camera icon so we can see you. And both of these icons, yeah, it's like you found the unmute icon.
Okay, I think I have successfully unmuted, so you should be able to hear me.
We can all hear you, yes. And I think many of us can probably imagine what you look like. All right, there you
Oh,
are.
there you go. You got me in full color.
Great. All right, Murray. You have applied to be a member of the Historic District Commission, which seems very fitting. But if you would like to tell us sort of your reasoning for throwing your hat in the ring, and tell us what you would bring to the commission, that would be great.
Sure. So it's something that I considered, and different people that approached me over the years, and I thought it was time to see whether or not I could lend a hand. So I think probably the biggest thing that has inspired me to do it is after speaking with a number of people that sit on the commission today, and getting their feelings as to whether or not the commission would be open to doing something that's been outside of their charge, I think historically, which has been primarily just a focus on the Kingston Historical District. And I'd like to get the feeling from the town council whether or not that's something that they have in mind as well. Because although I lived adjacent to the Kingston Historic District for about 20 years, it's not where my passion lies, quite frankly, is continuing the maintenance of a program that's been in place for, 50 years plus. I think the real work within the town around historic preservation falls outside of the Kingston Historic District, but is firmly planted in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan going back many iterations, but certainly within the 2014 and the draft of the 2020 comprehensive plan includes numerous policy items and action items that are outstanding. And if I were appointed, to the Historic District Commission. My efforts and energies would be pointed towards trying to tick off some of the priority items that are listed there.
Good. Questions for Murray?
I just have one question. It's Deborah Kelso, Murray. Priority, what would be top of the list for you?
Certainly, education. I think a lot of what we do in the town arena can be served through education. So that would be one of the things that I think the Historic District Commission would be well served by being a little bit more proactive and sharing with the community about the things that the commission can be doing about historic preservation and helping the community to expand upon the efforts to preserve some of our historic resources. And to that objective, I'd also suggest that a goal that you're probably aware of and it hasn't been achieved for some time is to expand upon the inventory of structure. So I think it was in 1984 when the last inventory was done under the auspices of the State Historic Preservation Commission. So that's 40 some years since the survey's been updated. So I think we as a town would do well by updating and refreshing that inventory of historic resources. And then that inventory serves as kind of a baseline for where the town wants to put its energies. And I think one of the things that once we have an updated inventory in place would make sense would be start looking at, and I imagine it's been looked at, but hasn't been really actioned upon, is updating the zoning regulations so that there are things in there that actually do protect our historic resources. There's been acknowledgement for I don't know how long that we should have something in place that prevents demolition of historic resources. I don't want to say prevents, but it is a check on demolition of historic resources. Certainly, private landowners have the right to do what they want with their property, but when there's a historic resource in question, there should be something built into the process that allows for the town to weigh in on the historic resource and provide alternatives to demolition if they're appropriate. So that's one example of something that the town has considered in the past, but I think has really failed to implement, is to put that in place from a regulatory standpoint.
All right, thank you, Murray. I'm going to have to end the interview there, unfortunately. But I think we get the sense for the qualifications you would bring to the commission. So we should be able to let you know fairly quickly. And again, thank you for coming forward and volunteering your time. We'll let you know soon.
You bet. Have a good evening.
All right, and we have gotten to 7:30 here. So with that, are we ready to begin the meeting? And streaming and recording?
You are.
Very good.
We're all set.
All right, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the South Kingstown Town Council. It is Monday, February 8th. The time is 7:30. Our first order of business is the pledge to the flag, as always. Susan, if you wouldn't mind leading us in the pledge, I'd be very grateful.
Of course. Everyone would join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And will clerk please take the roll?
Council President Collins,
Here.
Council Vice President McEntee,
Here.
Councilwoman Kelso,
Here.
Councilwoman Bergner.
Here.
I'm going out of order. Councilwoman Rose.
Here.
Thank you. All members are present.
Item 4 is the approval of minutes of previous meeting.
Rory McEntee, I'll make a motion to approve 4A and B.
Deborah Kelso, second.
We have a motion from Councilman McAtee, second from Councilwoman Kelso. Is there any discussion? Is there anyone opposed? That motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to the consent agenda, item 5.
Rory McEntee, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Deborah Kelso, second.
Motion from Councilman McEntee, second from Councilwoman Kelso. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 6, resolution licenses. 6A is a resolution granting a miscellaneous permit to conduct a portion of the Ocean State Road Race in South Kingstown on Sunday, October 24th, to road races and events of Warren, Rhode Island, subject to the execution of a hold harmless agreement indemnifying the town and issuance of a certificate of insurance naming the town as an additional insured for the event in the amount specified by the finance director. Application by Karen Zions. Let's see, is there anyone here to speak on agenda item 6A?
Yes, Karen is here. We are bringing her in.
Right, Karen, you've been brought in. We just need you to unmute yourself using that little microphone icon. And if you'd like us to see you, there you are.
Hello, how's everyone?
Doing well, surviving the snow. Thank you for coming forward with this license application. This is not your first time here. So tell us a little about the Ocean State Road Race.
So it was actually the only race that we did in 2020 out of 11 races for the year that were scheduled. We did manage to pull this off in October, and it was very successful. It's being used actually as a model for COVID racing in the state, and we're pretty proud of that fact. We had a lot less participants because we could only have so many. There was a regulation on how many we could have. So we had a lot less participants, but it still went really well. Managed to have everybody social distance. Everybody wore a mask. Everybody was pretty amenable and agreeable to that because they were pretty excited to race, having not done it for almost a year. So we're back at it again, and hoping to start off our season in April. And this is our season-ending race in October. So by October, we're hoping to be in full swing again.
Yes, hopefully all around. All right, any questions for Karen? How would one go about registering? I know the registrations might be limited again, but
Sure, they can go to our website, and it's roadraces.com, and road is spelled like Rhode Island, so it's RHODERACES.com. And register there. We'd love to have them. It's a marathon, half marathon, and a 5K.
all right. If I don't see any other questions, do I hear a motion?
Rory McEntee, I'll make a motion to approve 6A.
Deb Bergner, second.
We have a motion from Councilman McEntee, second from Councilman Bergner. Any further discussion? Is there anyone opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Good luck, Karen.
Great. Thanks so much.
See
Take
you
care,
soon.
everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
All right, and that brings us to item 7, communications. Communication 7C is resolutions adopted by the Cranston City Council and North Providence Town Council in support of lifting restrictions on small businesses due to COVID-19. What would we like to do with this? These ones.
So it's Deborah Kelso. I'll make a motion that we place this item 7C on file.
Rory McEntee, I'll second that motion.
Motion from Councilwoman Kelso, second from Councilman McEntee. Any discussion? Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously, and it brings us to 7D, a resolution adopted by the Cranston City Council requesting the Governor and General Assembly to allocate is that supposed to say $8 million?
I'm sorry, that should read $8 million. I just realized that this morning during the staff meeting when we were reviewing that. So if you'd make that correction.
$8 million in stimulus money to after school and summer programs. We've received that. What would we like to do with it?
Deborah Kelso, motion to place this item on file.
Rory McIntee, I'll second that motion.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Kelso, second from Councilman McIntee. Is there any discussion? Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously as well. And that brings us to 7F, a letter dated January 27th, 2021 from Alice Buckley, submitting her resignation from the Affordable Housing Collaborative Committee. We've received that one. What would we like to do now?
Deborah Kelso, I'll make a motion that we thank Alice Buckley for her service, accept her resignation, and encourage members of the town, residents of the town, to apply for a position on the Affordable Housing Collaborative.
Rory McIntee, I'll second that motion.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Kelso, second from Councilman McIntee. Any further discussion? Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously as well. I will note that I think that is the third open seat now on the Affordable Housing Collaborative. We definitely would like to see some folks get into those open slots, an important committee with all the focus that we're putting on affordable housing here. So maybe, I know we talked about advertising in the libraries for some of our boards and commissions. Maybe this is one that we could put at the top of the list there.
Abel, if I may, we just began running the boards and commissions vacancies ad in the paper.
Okay.
It ran on Friday. It will run for another 2 weeks, so we can make adjustments as necessary. But the Affordable Housing Collaborative is at the top of the list because it starts with A and it is listed. But
Perfect. All righty. 7H is an email dated January 28th, 2021 from Cynthia Caston, administrator, and Linda Redmond, president of the Peacedale Housing, Peacedale House, seeking assistance in obtaining COVID-19 vaccinations for their elderly residents. We've received that. I don't know if anybody's here to speak on this in particular, but if so, please raise your hand. In the meantime, Rob, did you want to just talk about a little bit about what you sort of talked with us about?
Sure, happy to do so. And Susan, if either Craig or Sue DeMasi are in the audience, we might want to pull them in as well. So yes, Peacedale House was identified by South Kingstown as one of the places where we would likely have seniors over the age of 75 under the criteria that were established by the Department of Health 2 weeks ago now. The folks over the age of 75 are those currently eligible for vaccination. So when the state of Rhode Island identified that group and requested that the municipalities begin to identify seniors in their communities who would receive vaccine, we went to three real sources. The first was the Rhode Island Special Needs Emergency Response List, RISNR, which is a list that identifies persons who have pre-existing medical conditions and might need assistance during an emergency. The state was recommending that that be the first list that municipalities go to when identifying those who would be eligible for the first round of vaccination. In our case, that number totaled somewhere under 70. Craig, do you remember the exact number we got off of RISNR?
Yes, it was 78 prior to the Department of Directors Health's press conference.
And then there was a reduction in that number because the list shrinks over time when you're dealing with any list, but particularly one with folks of advanced age. And then given that we were given 150 vaccines doses to give out, our next option, or the next place we looked, was congregate housing, on the theory that those over 75 living in close proximity to one another faced a particular danger. So Peacedale House was contacted as one of our congregate housing locations, as was Indian Run, and all of the persons over the age of 75 who were eligible, those over 75 were eligible, but all of those over the age of 75 and therefore were eligible for vaccine were contacted. And it's my understanding that all but 2 received the vaccine. There were 2 refusals at Peacedale House, is my understanding. And then finally, the last list we went to, and the list that we're now working from, is the voter registration list, which is no longer the voter registration list. It's the vaccination list, which was based on our voter registration list, but has grown to include all persons over the age of 75 who have self-identified to us, have called the senior center, have called town hall, but have identified themselves as eligible and have provided us with information so that we can reach them when we receive doses. We are still working backwards from oldest to youngest. Again, we've given out 150 vaccines at the South Road point of distribution. That really has put us in the mid-90s in terms of age. We've got a long way to go before we get to the 75-year-olds. We've got 210 doses that are slated to be delivered to us next Wednesday, and we've been told to expect another 210 the week after that. And we're expecting that to continue for some time going forward. So we will continue to work at the regional pod at South Road School on getting vaccine to the senior citizens over the age of 75. We are not, however, the only mechanism for senior citizens to seek vaccine. Seniors over the age of 75 can also request vaccine through CVS, Walgreens, and the state of Rhode Island will be setting up vaccine centers, DOH, Department of Health vaccine centers in the next week or so. So there's multiple paths to a vaccine. We will continue to focus on providing one of those paths for senior citizens over the age of 85 or 75 until all in that age category have been served. Did I miss anything, Craig?
No, I think that's a good synopsis of it.
All right.
How are we reaching out to folks? Like, I imagine we identify them, and then do we use phone?
Yeah, we've been handling about 600 phone calls a day. It really is the case that folks are getting to us. And really, there's no other way for us to do it. We've got the voter registration list. We were making calls from the voter registration list, but what we find is that that's not a particularly good list to be calling from, because people don't always put their phone numbers down on a list that they know political parties are going to get their hands on. They don't want to be bothered by the campaigns, so they don't list a phone number. So we've used that, but really at this point, it's incoming calls that we're using to establish and augment our vaccination list.
Councilwoman Rose.
Thank you. So I know that the report has already been pulled. The Rhode Island Special Needs report was already pulled. Will that be repulled as each age bracket opens up? I know, like, for example, my parents had no idea that existed. So when I instructed them to add their names, they were able to do so, but they won't be on that report that's been pulled now. So will folks be able to get on those age brackets that open up?
Yep, it's an excellent question. And I think the answer to this question and pretty much every other question is this is a very fluid environment. We really don't know exactly how people are going to be registering for vaccine going forward. We really don't. And for us to say that there's a definitive, here's the answer, do this, and you're going to be in perfect shape, would be a disservice to the public. I'm going to describe, as I did in the work session, because I think it's appropriate here, the state of vaccination in Rhode Island. The state has established 3 channels for vaccine. The first is the state centers for vaccination. The state vaccine centers are not currently operating. They will be stood up and will be operating within the next week or 2. That's channel number 1. Channel number 2 are private pharmacies. Those private pharmacies, such as CVS and Walgreens, have begun to register in Rhode Island. Elsewhere, in other parts of the country, they are already giving out vaccine, but in Rhode Island, they are just beginning to register. CVS started on Saturday of this past weekend, and Walgreens began on Sunday, yesterday. So that second channel is nearly up and running. Ironically, the third channel, and as opposed to the first, but the third channel are the regional pods, points of distribution. There are 5 regional points of distribution currently operating in Rhode Island. There may be more operating in the future in Rhode Island, but there are 5 currently. South Road School is one of those 5 points of distribution. Those points of distribution have done 2 things. First, they vaccinated the first responders. That was the first thing they were stood up to do, and they very successfully did that in South County. The next mission that was assigned to that third channel of distribution, those points of distribution, was vaccinating those over the age of 75. There was a lot of excitement around that because the state made it clear to the public that vaccinations for those over 75 would begin 2 weeks ago, Sunday, 2 Sundays ago. What the state didn't make clear was there was an extremely limited supply. There were 150 doses for all seniors over the age of 75 in South Kingstown, and we have over 2,900 seniors in that age category. We're going to be getting 210 next week, and we're going to be getting 210 after that. It's going to be a while if we rely entirely on the third channel. It's going to be quite some time, 10 weeks before we can vaccinate everybody in our category, at least if we go at that rate and we only use that channel. However, that's not the case. We're not the only channel, and that's not the only way people can get a vaccine. The people in that age category will be able to go to the state centers as soon as they are up and running. And the people in that age category are currently eligible and can register with Walgreens and CVS now. You can go online now to the corporate websites for CVS and Walgreens and register for an appointment if you are 75 years or older. So that's where we are with that. As we start going from the 75-year-olds down in age, and the essential policy in Rhode Island is to follow age down from the oldest resident, the oldest citizen, the oldest person in the state to the youngest. We will be doing this in rounds. So it's cumulative. If we call the 75 plus age group, Group A, and the 70 to 74s, Group B, and the 65s to 70s, Group C, and the 50s to 65s, Group D, then we will be eligible for Group A, and then A and B are eligible, and then A and B and C are eligible, and then A and B and C and D are eligible. It is not our expectation. It is not the way that the rollout will happen. It is not the way the program will work, that everybody in each category must be vaccinated before we move on to the next. It will be rolling eligibility. So there's multiple channels, and there will be multiple groups who are eligible over time. So it's a complicated thing. Whether we end up calling people from a Reisner list or calling people below the age of 75, in my informed, but still not fully informed, since there is no perfect information. In my view, it is not likely that we will be calling persons who are 65 years old or 70 years old. It is much more likely that once we get past our oldest population, that we will be relying on some form of self-registration. So it's not the case that the Reisner list will be the basis for us calling 70-year-olds or 65-year-olds or 45-year-olds. We are likely to be relying on those persons who have the technical savvy and the technology to register. We'll be relying on them to do so. That's a very long answer to your question, but I hope it's helpful.
Rob, okay, I should just refocus us. We are considering communication letter H. Do we want to have any other discussion, or do I hear a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to place item 7H on file.
Rory McEntee, I'll second that motion.
Motion from Councilwoman Kelso, a second from Councilman McEntee. Is there any further discussion? Hear anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and that brings us to communication item M. A letter dated January 23rd, 2021 from John Patrick Shanley concerning the contributions made to the South Kingstown community by the late Barbara Ann Hackey, and requesting that the town council consider renaming or naming the senior center after Mrs. Hackey. That has been received. What would we like to do with this?
I'd like to do it. Rob and Mike, what would we have to do to accomplish this?
This is Mike. I mean, that could be a council decision. Perhaps what to do, though, is to refer it to Terry or whoever Rob wants it referred to have some discussion about this and come up with a recommendation. That would be my thought.
I mean, naming is a prerogative of the town council. It has been one that is historically carefully done in South Kingstown. There are very few buildings that are named in South Kingstown. That's a matter of preference, and it's something that is by no means legally required. But I do think that Mike's recommendation that this be referred to the Rec Commission or to a body that can sort of come up with it, make the case, sort of just put the documentation together and make the case for doing it or not doing it, I think makes sense.
Okay, I'll make a motion to refer the matter to the Parks and Rec Department and to report back to the council at the next scheduled meeting with recommendation.
It's Deborah Kelso. I'll second that.
The motion from Councilman McAtee, a second from Councilwoman Kelso. Any further discussion?
Oh, yeah. So we should certainly reach out to Bob Hackey, her son, and make sure that that's something that family would like before. I mean, I'm hoping that Pat Shanley did that, but at least connect with the family to make sure that we're honoring her in a way that is fitting rather than take on Shanley's idea. Right? Would the Rec Commission be talking to Barbara's family?
We'll certainly reach out. I think that makes sense. Let them know that this has been referred to the Recreation Department and ask for their feedback.
All right, very good. Any further discussion? All right, did I see no objection? That motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 8 on the agenda, comments from interested citizens. So we'll open the floor to anybody who's listening or watching. If you are, I don't see anybody on their phones. Greg Sweet, you are first with your hand in the air. So we will bring Greg in. If you do want to speak right now, all you do have to do is raise your hand. We'll call on people in order that they raise their hands. And if your name isn't clear on the list, just state your name for the record. All right, Greg, have at it.
Hi, my name's Greg Sweet. I wanted to talk a little bit about the snow ordinance. I think one of the things this ordinance is doing is dividing the town even more than what it is. And I don't think that was the intent originally of this ordinance. The town does not have enough people to shovel or clear all the sidewalks in town in an appropriate time frame. And I get that. But to tell property owners that they have to do it, or potentially they can get fined, is not fair, because the town is not thinking outside of the box. The town can certainly hire subcontractors to take care of these, the sidewalks, maybe not have to do every one in town, but they can do that. They have snow removal budgets every year, and it can be part of that budget. Which I don't know how many have seen it, but there's been quite a bit of public shaming of property owners that have not cleared the sidewalks in front of their places. Several of the people I know personally certainly are not healthy enough to do it. And one of them, I can tell you, is too embarrassed to call the town and ask for a waiver. And I get that feeling, I really do. I would like to see the town council look at this ordinance again and maybe get rid of it, or at least go about it in a different way. There's too many things that are up in the air. You know, how wide do you make the path? How many times do you have to shovel it because the damn walkways get have the snow pushed back in on the area that you shoveled? I didn't see anywhere in any ordinance not to put salt down on the sidewalks, because salt will eat away at the concrete over time. So if salt happens to be the cheapest and the property owner is forced to do this, they're gonna go with the cheapest, and that may not be the best. I happen to have pets. I buy the Pate's Pet Safe ice remover. Not everybody's going to do that. Not everybody has the same feelings about pets. So there's too many things that are up in the air that you're just leaving it on the homeowner or the property owner to take upon themselves and do the best they can. I hope you guys will revisit this, because to say, you know, the town doesn't have the manpower to do that, but then throw it on the property owner to do it, when, especially now, they're all working with skeleton crews because of the pandemic. Everybody's hurting. They don't have full staffs. So you're asking people to do what the town is not asking themselves to do, and that's not fair. So I'm asking you to please reconsider this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment tonight?
No, I just want to thank you, Greg, for saying something, because I have seen in social media people pointing out who did and who didn't do it correctly, and I think that creates a lot of animosity. But I'm more concerned about people getting exemptions, and then the community not knowing House A has an exemption, isn't going to shovel. I mean, and then it just creates a lot of bad blood, and we seem to be focused on compliance a lot instead of, I don't know, a better solution. So I hope that we can talk about this again. And people don't know who, it seems very easy to get the exemption, but people don't know who's gotten an approval. So then they're angry at that person. I think that's what's also an issue.
Yeah, I'm 62, so apparently I can get the exemption, but I'd like to think I'm healthy enough to do my part for the town. But it certainly would be nicer to have the town come up to me and say, would you mind taking care of your walkway in front of your store, as opposed to saying, you're responsible for it. And if you don't do it, you open yourself up to, I think it's $175 fine. I don't know if any's been handed out, but that's in your face, that's what could be done. We've cleared the front of our store for the last 45 years, never asked the town to do any of it. But God knows we've shoveled enough on the sidewalk, and the damn plows, they're doing their job, I'm not complaining, but they push the snow back on there. Then it turns to hard ice. You can't get that off. So we put the pathway on our property and not on the sidewalk, and now we don't have a problem. The plows can't push the snow that far up. But I'm getting my chops busted. Someone took a picture saying we didn't clear our sidewalk, but yet we got a better path on our property for people to walk on. And how fair is that to me? I'm not asking for sympathy either. There are a lot of people that are willing to take care of in front of their property. I'm saying, ask them. Don't tell them they have to. That's just wrong. That's the wrong approach. So.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Any other comments from council members? All right. Seeing none, that brings us to item 9, the town manager's report.
And if I may, I'd like to share my screen.
Please.
Okay. All right. And Susan, if we can call Craig, Stanley, Terry, and John back in, I think we have a conversation to be had around items that each of them has something to contribute to. Or has something to contribute. I won't recap what was just said about the vaccination program, but I would like for Terry and Craig to describe the operations at the senior center and at the regional pod for the last couple of weeks, because really it's been extraordinary work that's being done by the people at the senior center and the people who are manning the point of distribution at South Road. So if we've got Terry and Craig, I'd like to just get a quick report out on what they've been experiencing over the last couple of weeks. Terry, you with us?
Yes. Good evening. You want me to start?
Please tell us what's been going on over there.
Sure. Well, I'll let Craig speak to the pod activity, since that's he's in control of that completely and doing a fabulous job. What I can share with the town council and the community at large is the efforts that have been underway with outreach and contact and receiving calls from the 75+ population, residents of the town of South Kingstown. The senior center staff, Sue DeMasi and her staff, have been doing an outstanding job with the assistance of, when we can get it, with folks from EMS as well as the police department, handling the call volume that's coming into the senior center. We have a phone bank going. That is the primary function of the staff at the senior center since the week before last. Scheduling appointments for folks when we get the information from Craig and SKEMS in regards to how many we can schedule. The staff is doing that. Half of them are scheduling appointments, and right now half are receiving phone calls from the public. Again, one of the things about this population, as you've heard already, is they just want to know that somebody knows they're in town and that they're on a list, so that when their time comes, someone will be contacting them. So as we've had many people leave messages, our staff is doing an excellent job trying to reach out and return every call that is made to the senior center. We realize that may take a couple of days, but when staff comes in the morning, there are upwards of 50 voicemails, and the phones start ringing immediately. So We are on top of it as best as we can be. Most, I would say 95% of the people who call are extremely grateful to make contact, be able to share their updated contact information, and understand that there's a process in place and that it may take some time, but they will be able to get vaccinated. So we definitely have that process down. We encourage people to call if they have not already called.
Right.
Folks who have already called, we have their information. What we're experiencing now is kind of a second round of calls of folks wanting to know what the status is. We share that the town only has so many doses coming in per week. And as they come in and as we're notified from Craig Stanley and his staff, we begin to make appointments. And we'll continue to do that. That's what we'll do until either other avenues are opened up. And
That's really a very, very important point. Folks have to recognize that we have a very limited phone bank. And if you've called in and we've got your information, you're on the list, and we will be going down the list. It may be weeks before we get to you on the list, but if you've called in once, we've not lost that information, you're on the list. And if you're calling a second or third time or leaving a phone message or something like that, it's actually disrupting the efficiency of the system. We're better off if you call once and know that we've got that list. It's not going away. We will be calling down that list. But again, as we were noting earlier, there are two other mechanisms. You can call to get on the state vaccination center list, and you can also call the pharmacies, CVS and Walgreens, and get on those lists. You don't have to stick with one channel. Wherever you're going to get the vaccine is fine. If you've registered with us, that's good. If you can register with CVS and Walgreens, that's good too. And if you can register with the state, you've registered everywhere you can, and that's better. Sorry, Terry.
Nope, that's quite all right. And we are encouraging people to do that. We're trying to explain that there are other alternatives, but to reassure them that they are on a list with the town. And they appreciate having a voice and hearing someone tell them and reassure them. And we'll continue to do that.
Craig, how'd the pod go on the 150 dose vaccination?
It went very well. I think my partners throughout the region, I think we did a pretty good job. We were given short notice to contact everybody, and I really have to thank the senior center, Terry and Susan. Her staff have done a phenomenal job of trying to help get people registered. It really worked out well. We administered the first 150 vaccinations. And we have scheduled the second round because we're giving the Moderna vaccine, which is 28 days apart. So we've already scheduled those initial 150 people for the second round. We are getting the week of actually the 17th of February. We start on the next tier, which we are working on now. That's where we're getting 210 doses per week for 4 weeks. And again, as Rob mentioned, we get our objectives or our orders from the Department of Health. They provide us the amount of vaccinations we're getting, and then we facilitate getting that done. The pod we began the end of December with the first tier that we were charged with, and that was first responders, nursing staff of whatnot. We probably administered several thousand vaccinations through there. We've made adjustments as we've gone through it to be more efficient. On a typical day, we may give up to 400 vaccinations or 700 through there. From the time they walk in and register till the time that they leave the pod could be as little as 25 minutes. And that includes vaccination. And then everybody has to wait 15 minutes to make sure there's no issues. And I would say in our pod, we have administered probably over 3,000 vaccinations, and we have not had one anaphylactic reaction.
So Craig,
yes.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
yeah,
is worth explaining here that the pod is not just distributing those doses that are allocated to South Kingstown residents, but others in Southern Rhode Island. Can you just?
Yeah, correct.
How
Yeah,
how
yeah.
that works?
Our partners working on Narragansett, Jamestown, North Kingstown, Richmond, Hopkinton, Charlestown, and Westerly. And it's really been a community effort. We're sharing resources. We're working very well together, and we really have a pretty efficient operation. And we really couldn't do it without our partners. So as we've moved forward, we have elected to remain as a regional pod just because of the efficiency of it and getting the job done.
Very good.
Any questions? Or it's been very moving, I will say. And I spent some time going into different observation rooms and thanking that population for coming in. And as I shared with some of the staff, some of them were so grateful. You could see the relief in them after they got the vaccination, and it was very moving. It really was. Probably I've seen a lot of things in my career, but I think that was probably one of the biggest things in my career to be able to get that done, to get the vaccinations to that group. It was very moving, and we're going to do everything we can to get everybody vaccinated.
Thank you, Craig.
All right, if we can move on down the list, is John in the meeting at this point? Have we got Chuck?
Yep, I'm
Yes,
here.
he is.
John, you want to talk about the erosion at the Matunic Wall, and then we're going to dive into snow removal.
Yeah, so we did with that last storm. It seems like the nor'easters, we get more erosion than we do, let's say, than during the hurricane events. So we do, the erosion has proceeded inland some more, down where we have the Jersey barriers, so much so we've probably got about 4 feet from the edge of pavement to where, the scouring is at this point. We've applied to CRMC to try to get a maintenance assent to try to backfill that area with some sand, at least to provide some cushion if there's a future storm. And we also had quite a bit of erosion down west of Carpenters, down where the 5 cottages are, I think there's only 2 cottages left. There was a lot of overwash that came over and went into Cards Pond. And so much so that the last house down there was inaccessible, and one of our fire hydrants was, all you could see was the operating that left at the top. So there was quite a bit of overwash from the ocean to the west as well.
John, just on that point, I was walking down there by Cards Pond and where the breach occurs naturally. And it looks like, to me, the breach is almost fundamentally changed, really widened out. Is there the potential that that's, with further erosion, that the pond will just open into the ocean? Do we know?
So actually, I think after Superstorm Sandy, that happened. That pond opened up, and then, Mother Nature giveth and she taketh away. I mean, at one point it filled back in again. But I mean, it's, that's not beyond the realm of possibility, either there or to the east of Deep Hole into Potter's Pond. I know during Sandy, there was a lot of overwash then that made it up into Potter's Pond from the ocean. So, if the planets align and we get a perfect storm, I mean, that's not outside the realm of possibility.
Okay. All right. Before I move on, I do want to just make one note about sort of the way to think about messaging about COVID. I missed this point, and I just want to share it. The way I'm looking at where we are in the vaccine program is essentially this. We're holding down the fort. We're taking care of sort of urgent distribution of small doses as they become available. We're sort of filling in, making sure that the local pods are responding to the 150 doses here, the 200 doses, 210 doses there. And we'll be able to continue to do that. And we will ramp up if given the opportunity. But really, we're just holding down the fort. And the cavalry is going to be the private sector firms that have got distribution networks that deal with drugs and vaccines and that sort of thing on a regular basis. we will, when we get this thing up and running, see that the CVSs and the Walgreens and the private pharmacies are just totally equipped to deal with the distribution. So I think it's important for folks to know right now is not sort of the big grand final design for distribution. The distribution really will rely on distribution chains that are established in the pharmacy industry, information controls on health information, that sort of thing, that exist in the private pharmacy industry. The cavalry is coming. We will hold the fort for as long as we have to. We will ramp up and do everything we have to, but ultimately, the solution that the federal government is pushing toward, and the one that I think we're going to see be the way that most people get their vaccine, is going to be through the private pharmacy distribution network. I think that's important for folks to know. This is just small doses that are coming at us. It's not the full-blown vaccination program at this point. We're getting there, but it's not there yet. And with that, I'd like to move on to the sidewalk snow removal issues that we've seen for the last couple of snowstorms, because I know the council has a lot of questions, and we've been fielding a lot of questions. Actually, I thought we had correspondence that made this agenda. There will be a number of correspondence that have come in on the next council agenda because they did not make it for this council agenda in terms of the sequence or the time that they came into the office.
Liz Gledhill's communication was on there. It just got filed under consent agenda, so it was on there.
Okay. I missed it as we were going through the agenda. At any rate, the issue with snow removal is, it's miserable. This is, as Greg Sweet correctly pointed out, we just don't have the resources. We just don't have the labor power to remove the snow from every sidewalk in town. And the ordinance was designed to sort of say to folks, we need a helping hand. We need folks to come in. Nobody has been fined under our ordinance. Nobody has been issued a citation under our ordinance. We've tried to use the ordinance as an opportunity to get out and talk to property owners. I understand that that's not necessarily the way folks perceive the government knocking on the door ever. But we've tried to knock politely. We've not been trying to kick in doors, and we're not trying to use this as a blunt instrument to force people to do things that are uncomfortable. We've tried other solutions over the years. The idea of hiring subcontractors seems like a logical thing, but you can't get them. Once you get to a storm event, what you find is that there's just so many snow plowmen out there, and there's not a lot of folks who are willing to do this work. Period. I mean, it's sort of catch as catch can in this business, and there's not a lot of folks who are willing to do that on a regular basis. We've had difficulty reaching out and trying to get those folks in the past. And even when you do, they also run into the same limitations. They're also subject to the same pressures and the same frustrations. We have one company in town that does do sidewalks for a large number of people. Their machine blew, not this time, but their machine blew a tire and couldn't get out there 2 storms ago. And we had a situation where another company was unable to remove snow because his guys were exhausted because they had been out doing parking lots. So we have the same pressures even in the private sector that we have with our crews. So there's some difficulties that are just inherent in this operation, in this business. It's hard for you to deal with events that are, episodic and hard to predict. When you have a long duration storm, that's going to be a problem for any company or any government trying to remove snow. So getting down to the folks closest to the sidewalk seemed to make sense. I'll tell you, we're not wedded to anything. I mean, if we want to hire crew, we can hire crew. It will cost us. Taxes will have to go up if we're going to be hiring people who do this and try to find other things for them to do if we're not just subcontracting this work out. And I'd like John to talk a little bit about the subcontracting concept, because I think that is one that has a lot of appeal. But John, what's your...
Yeah, so just as a little background, if I can just take a minute. So as far as what we do, so we've got 22 plow routes and 11 sanding routes. And typically we pre-treat the town before a storm comes. So that way we don't have adhesion of snow to the road surface. And then we plow for the duration of the storm, and then we post-treat once the storm is done. Now it takes us about 4 hours to do a route. And that's to complete the route after the storm has ceased. So we'll be plowing all throughout the duration of the storm. And it takes us 4 hours to do the plowing in both directions and the pushback. And then we go out to do the sanding. So in the past, we've done the quote unquote, the town has done the loop sidewalks. My guys are toast. They just don't have, they've been up 24, 36 hours. We don't have 3 shifts like the police or the EMS does. We have 1 shift. That's it. So I think that was the, the thought process on trying to have the ordinance. Now, that being said, we can't get in fact, we tried to go out years ago to get contracts for doing snow plowing, never mind sidewalks. And whether it's George Sherman or any other local, they've got their contracts committed. They do Wakefield Mall, they do Belmont. We can't get them even during a cataclysmic storm event that come in. They're already committed. And the contractors that I have talked to that do have some clients for sidewalk snow removal, I've asked them if they would be willing for us to put a name on a list that we could provide to the public. They want no more accounts. They said, we're full. We don't want any more sidewalk accounts. So I think it's a case of supply and demand. There's just not enough firms out there, and we certainly don't have the staff to follow up with timely sidewalk snow removal. It's a problem. It's a problem. I think, that's what we're seeing now is, half the community or, many people want the sidewalk shoveled immediately after the storm. And the reality is it's a very difficult thing for us to do and, for some of the property owners to do, or to try to hire somebody to do it for them. It's a problem.
And I will say, one of the issues that we've encountered over the last couple of storms is just managing, folks' expectations. And part of this is that the ordinance is new and people aren't comfortable with the expectation, what's required. And every time I get a call, whether it's from someone who is upset because a sidewalk isn't shoveled appropriately or wide enough or what have you, or it's someone who says, how can you expect me to shovel the sidewalk within 12 hours after the cessation of the storm? The answer is always, what all the ordinance requires, all anyone is asking is reasonable activity. All we can do is ask for people to make a reasonable attempt to shovel a sidewalk. If a snow plow comes by and puts the snow back on the sidewalk, we can't expect you to keep shoveling day in and day out. What we can expect, all we can expect is a reasonable attempt to clear a sidewalk. And what we can expect is a reasonable level of cleared. I'm looking at Terry, our bike path is done today. It's been plowed, but there is still packed snow and there are some icy patches. We do not use sand and we do not use salt on the bike path because it's a bike path, and sand and salt are a hazard for bicyclists even after the snow and the ice are removed. So we don't do that because it creates a longer duration dangerous condition. We do plow it. It's been plowed, but it's not to bare blacktop everywhere on the bike path. We too have to be held only to a reasonableness standard. We can't do the impossible, and we don't expect private property owners to do the impossible. Where someone sets up a parallel path or a path that is reasonable and logical across their own property because it's easier, more convenient, and again, reasonable, that's fine. We don't necessarily need a sidewalk cleared if there's a close by pathway across a parking lot that is safe and accessible to the public. That's a perfectly reasonable response. We're really looking for the public to be responsible for just looking out for each other to some extent, because we simply do not have a means to do it as a town government. We can't hire contractors. We really can't afford to hire part-time staff and hope that they're there. And this is a problem that we have again in the public sector and the private sector. If folks call out sick, that creates stress during the snow event, and that happens. You have, especially during COVID, you have folks who aren't available for work. So that becomes another problem. I really do understand and appreciate all of the frustrations that we've been fielding for the last couple of storms from property owners who, don't see it as their responsibility to make sure that the state's property is clear of snow. I understand that perspective. I understand that folks don't want to be responsible for taking snow off of the state's sidewalk or the town's sidewalk. But these are sidewalks that are there for everyone's benefit, and the businesses and the properties that are adjacent to them do enjoy a benefit. And we do need people to make a reasonable effort to keep them clear, because we cannot do it alone. We just can't do it alone. If we had a solution, if there were another way to do this, if somebody's got a solution, we're happy to hear about it. I'm not averse to ramping up the Department of Public Works so that we've got more people to do this. I'd be happy to have more equipment and more people to go out and clear sidewalks. The consequence of doing that, though, is that taxes will go up. And unless we've got a special taxing district that deals with only those parts of town that have sidewalks, the tax will be felt by those who do not have sidewalks and do not enjoy the localized benefit of sidewalks. So there's a lot to this puzzle. I don't think that we've got the perfect solution, but I will say this: in the last two storm events, things have been, for the most part, there are problems that have arisen. Broad Rock has been a particular problem for us. And I do think that the Peacedale area has been one that we have to spend more, pay more attention to in the future. But generally speaking, Main Street, the lower portions of High Street, 108 down in the central business district in around Dale Carlier Corner, these areas have been good. Property owners have stepped up and have done the right thing, and we have seen clearer sidewalks. You could walk from Dale Carlier Corner almost uninterrupted, a few properties in the way, but almost uninterrupted to High Street, which is pretty remarkable. There's a lot of property owners down there, and they've done the right thing for the last couple of storms. It's not perfect. And yes, I agree with Mr. Sweet that we need to get out and gently remind folks. We've done that. I mean, I've gone door to door, letting folks know you're not going to get fined, but you got to know this is the ordinance and this is your obligation. This is your duty. I've also gone out and shoveled where folks either haven't or haven't, had the ability to do so. That's not going to solve the problem. My being out there with a shovel is nice, but it's not going to solve the problem. We've got a lot of work to do.
Rob, yeah, and I think that is a good point. I mean, snow has always been annoying, and in some respect, before the ordinance and after the ordinance, I think a good question to ask and answer is, is it better now after the ordinance was passed than it was before? Can the ordinance be improved and make things better further than that? I think, when we passed the ordinance, I remember big complaint in the community was Dale Carlier Corner in particular. A lot of the commercial districts were not being, cleared, and people were upset about that because those roads are very busy and very dangerous for forcing people into the roadway. So I do think that there's been improvement there. So that's nice to see. One question I do have, I remember when we were forming the ordinance, we talked about the loop, and my recollection is that we said we were going to continue to clear the loop. We might not get to it immediately, but is that happening still?
So I'll let John comment on it, but what the ordinance requires is that the Director of Public Services, Director of Public Works, identify the priority roads each fall. So those have been published, and they're a shorter list than we've done in the past. John, you want to comment on where we are on that? Because it's still a flexible concept. There is room for improvement. We do need to, we're going to come back to the council with some proposed amendments to this ordinance. I do think that Broad Rock Road turns out to be a particular case that has to be handled by the town, simply because there's no other one party that we can really get to do that. And then the rest of the loop, particularly around Peacedale Elementary. John, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we do put a display ad in the Narragansett Times each fall of the roads that are the priority roads, which are the loop roads that we have done in the past, but we are not at this point doing, if somebody hasn't cleared them, we're not doing them unless it's a person who's sought an exemption and was granted an exemption.
And I do think that this is an area for improvement for us. Again, taking some of the burden off, but not all of it, is where we're going to ultimately land. We're going to end up, but again, the challenge there is the time. It's not a question of whether we can get to those. We can get to them, of course, but it may take us a day or two, and that can be problematic. Broad Rock is not done as of 4 o'clock today, was reported earlier in the meeting today. And there's school tomorrow at 8 o'clock. So that walkway right now is not good. Technically, under the ordinance, those are property owners who abut property and the sidewalk should have been shoveled. They weren't, and we recognize that it's a problem. We're going to have to get out there and just do that section of road. Similarly, we've had complaints around the Peacedale Elementary School. There's a couple of commercial properties that have sidewalk adjacent to the State Road and Kersey Road. Those are going to have to be dealt with as well. I will note that that's one of the places where I think the reasonableness thing kicks in. One of the complaints is that the Kingston Pizza sidewalk is not cleared, but Kingston Pizza has a very wide, safe path for anyone who wants to. And in fact, the natural tendency is to cut the corner by walking through the parking lot anyway. And they're not objecting to that. That's a reasonable path. It doesn't need to be the perimeter of the property line in order for it to be a reasonable response. Technically, yes, the sidewalk is supposed to be cleared, but it's a state road and receives a lot of state plowings. So if the more reasonable approach is to simply carve a path in the parking lot, which is never very full, it's not a particularly busy parking lot, it's not a particularly dangerous parking lot, that's a fine strategy for making sure people can walk safely from point A to point B.
All right, thanks, Rob. We have a couple hands raised. Councilwoman Bergman, you were first.
Yeah, I wasn't sure my hand was working. It was been up for a while. So my question earlier, we kind of glossed by it, but is it possible to hire temporary seasonal workers, or that's not possible to do? I mean, it sounds like that's not a feasible option.
So it's a tricky problem. So the answer is we can always hire seasonal workers, but the problem is this is episodic stuff. We can't hire somebody and say, we want you to work on December 5th, December 19th, January 23rd, and February 14th, because we have no idea when the snowstorms are going to be. So if we're hiring people, we're hiring them on a sort of on-call basis. That already is not a very attractive job proposition for most people. If we're hiring people who do snow removal themselves, they've got their own customers and they don't need us. So if we're going to hire town employees as casual town employees, the scheduling problem becomes really problematic, because by the time you get to the storm that you need them at, they may already have taken a shift at their other job and available to us. That's a really tough scheduling problem. I suppose we could have a lot of on-call guys if there were a lot of on-call guys who were willing to do this. Our experience has been that there isn't. There's not a sufficient supply of people willing to go out early in the morning or late at night to shovel or push a snowblower.
Okay, so a lot of this conversation has been about the technical process of the snow removal, but I think what we really maybe want to roll it back and talk about some communication issues, because I think people have some awareness that there's an ordinance, but they don't understand all the nuances of it. And so maybe, there needs to be a better FAQ. There needs to be something that people can refer to, that we can say, this is the rights of the person who owns the property, or this is the, these are the allowances, because we have 30,000 people paying attention to maybe where 5,000 people are. So you have a lot of eyes on a very small area, and people are vigilante-ish. I didn't hear Greg ask for a gentle reminder in his thing. He was basically saying we need to not shame people. So I think the council's obligation is to educate the community so that they're doing it, like you said, to be a good contributing member of the community. That's why you're shoveling. You're not shoveling to avoid the wrap of the newspaper. You're shoveling because this is where we live and it helps everybody. But I think people are now they're not happy that people aren't doing their job, and they're pointing it out.
Yep.
In ways. And I think, why do they do that? And I'm like, because we're in COVID and people have been in their houses and they're angry and they're frustrated. You can hear it in everyone's desire to move on from this. And so the community probably isn't in a very happy place, but we need to do a better job of trying to explain what the ordinance is, because I think the ordinance is making people angry. And knowing that we're going to have snow tomorrow, we're going to do this again. So I know Jess asked for it to be on the agenda. I hope we can just put it on the agenda for 2 weeks from now so that we can then revisit it, and that people can,
Sure.
I'm not saying revise the ordinance, but when I think of like the town manager's report, it's here, but like, unless you read the fine print and everything, you wouldn't know that that's a potential to talk about it. So that's why I was like, if it's on the agenda, the larger community can know we're going to talk about it.
So I just want to be clear. What is it that we want on the agenda for 2 weeks out? It's not an action item. We're putting what on the agenda? Discussion of the ordinance?
About a notice for a public hearing, and then we have the public hearing 2 weeks from that meeting, and then we go over potential modifications or repeal the ordinance. Can we do that, Rob?
We can do whatever the council wants to do. I would suggest that it may not be ripe yet. I mean, amending an ordinance while we're still putting together the suggested amendments that staff would put, we haven't got a list of things that we would suggest you change.
So I would say that we need to have a public informational agenda item, because this ordinance was made last year. We didn't have a snowfall. This year, it looks like we're going to be a little snowier. So we want it's just basically an educational item that we can explain what people can ask questions. They can say, how do I get an exemption? What does this mean? Is the list of exemptions public? Could I call and say, why is 47 whatever Kettle Street not plowed? I mean, oh, there's an exemption there. I mean, there's all the things that people want to know that we're not telling them, and then all they know is people are supposed to shovel their sidewalks and some people aren't. So to speak more kind and communicative to the community in 2 weeks. But Jess has her hands up. Maybe she knows. Yes, in the end, what are we doing when they get an exemption? Who is shoveling that? Eventually the town comes back through, so that people need to know that, if 47 Kettle has the exemption, you're going to have to wait 24 more hours, and what's the process? Because otherwise they're calling and reporting and just bogging everything down.
Yeah. We don't, by the way, we haven't received a lot of neighbors calling in on each other. That has not been.
Well, they're doing it on social media. So that's what Greg mentioned. That's what I've seen. So
Right.
but Jess is here with her hand up, so I don't want to talk over her anymore. Go ahead, Jess.
I'll control the meeting. Thanks.
Sorry.
So I take Deb's point. I just want to say that as much as I wish everybody was tuning into our meetings and think that this would be a great way to educate the public, there's probably other means of the town reaching out to the residents about the ordinance. I know that, Rob, you drafted a letter last year that you sent to people. So maybe that could be as simple as resending that, but also you created this YouTube channel that is down there in the green zone. This might be something where you could have yourself or other town employees talk about what's in the ordinance, the process of applying for the way, the exemption, how the town gets to those exempted properties. So
We'll make a star out of John Choquette. Yep. I do think that a tutorial video that can be distributed in multiple channels on Facebook, through YouTube, that's an easy thing for us to do.
All right. And now, Councilwoman Rose.
Thank you, Abel. So I guess I just want to say that I do agree education is key. We need to let people know that. I don't know that everybody in town knows about this ordinance. I'm sure there are many, many people who don't know about it. The other thing that I want to make sure we're keeping in mind is that due to COVID, busing is not an option for all of our school children. Parents were asked at the beginning of the year if they would be able to opt out. And I think that several people that I spoke with chose to opt out with the understanding that they would be able to walk their children to school. That is not the case if they can't get through on sidewalks, if they can't get their kids to school safely. So we really, really need everybody to do their part so that these kids can get to school. And then, what are we doing for the kids that can't get to school? They can't pass safely. It's not equitable, right? So we need to really think about that. And see if we can work with the school department maybe to get these roads around the schools cleared, the sidewalks close to the schools cleared. I don't want anyone to get hurt, and I want kids to be able to get to school safely.
It's an excellent point, and I was on the phone with the superintendent this afternoon discussing just that. And in fact, I was on the phone with the superintendent and Terry Murphy at the same time. Well, not the same time, but just about the same time. Not on one call, but switching calls. Because the bike path through Peacedale has been cleared. In fact, I can pull up a photograph for the council to sort of highlight where we are, because we don't do salt, we don't do sand. There is packed snow, there is some ice on that surface, which, given the intended use of the bike path, is appropriate. But it is a condition that is not ideal for a young mother pushing a stroller and bringing a young child to the elementary school. That is not ideal. But again, we get to the question of what's the appropriate standard for clearing. And, and after a 10-inch storm, it just isn't feasible for there to be to the blacktop clearing of every sidewalk everywhere. That's not true. It's not possible for the private sector, and it's not going to be possible for us with the bike path or even, the sidewalks in front of Town Hall. We do everything we can to make sure that, ice treatment is put down. The ordinance requires that an ice treatment, sand or ash be put down. That's what's reasonable, but there's still going to be ice. It is still winter in New England, and we're not going to be able to resolve all of the potential hazards that come from snow and ice. But I was on the phone with the superintendent. They will be out clearing the ice from sections of the bike path where it intersects with Kingston Road tomorrow morning, because they're out earlier. Her crew actually just is out a little bit earlier than ours. So I asked her to make sure that a school district crew was out doing that. I think you're exactly right. We do need to coordinate these things. Safe pathways to schools is everybody's responsibility. We'll work with the school department to make sure that if we can't get to it, they know about it so they can. But that we can do. That we can do. So we can certainly do a video. I think a video is a good idea. I think that, you know, anything we can do to make folks, familiarize folks with the ordinance, and not even the ordinance, just the idea that, you know, having a safe pedestrian friendly environment is good for business. It's good for the community. It improves our quality of life. I'm happy. Look, if this ordinance were on the books, I'd be a perfectly happy person if there were more snow removal. If taking it off the books removed more snow, I'd suggest to you, you get rid of it tomorrow. If it, you know, doesn't get more snow off, then, you know, taking it off the books isn't necessarily the right action. We're not looking for, nobody's wedded to any particular solution. We just want to make sure that the roads and the sidewalks and the places where people need to travel, the bike path, are safe for people to travel. As safe as is reasonable given the conditions. We're not going to be able to, you know, remove all hazards from winter, but we will continue to strive for the best we can do with regard to the town properties and encourage everyone who is adjacent to a state sidewalk or a sidewalk of any jurisdiction to do what they can to make sure that those are safe as well.
Councilwoman Berger.
Thank you. I just wanted to apologize, Abel. I was just deferring my time to Jess. I didn't want to be the role keeper. I just was trying to yield my time because we were talking directly about putting it on the agenda. So I apologize. I just didn't want.
It's okay.
It was Jess's idea to bring it to the thing, and I didn't want to sail right over her and bring it forward. I apologize.
Okay. It's still a new council. Takes time to get to this stuff.
And while we're in apology mode, I also want to just apologize to Councilwoman Rose. She did send an email request on Wednesday asking that this topic be put on the agenda for discussion. I thought I was complying with that request by making sure that there was a place to discuss it. And if that wasn't her objective, I apologize for misunderstanding.
Oh,
all right, so continuing down, our YouTube channel is live, and as the council knows, related to our YouTube channel, the smartphone application is now just days away from publication. Council members received a beta version of that to sort of try to work through and break. If you've noticed any defects with that, our IT director would love to know about them. But YouTube is now live. We encourage the public to go onto YouTube and type in Town of South Kingstown, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And when the app comes out, we'd encourage folks to download the app from either the Apple Store or from the Google Store. It's a pretty simple and straightforward application that will give you access to notifications and to our YouTube notifications, our video notifications, which we think are going to be a fun way to communicate information like what you have to do to make sure your sidewalk is safe. Other items, the stage 2 application for the school facilities project has been submitted. And that's really about it. I will close my report unless there are any questions.
Councilwoman Berger, is that your hands?
Sorry, just about the YouTube channel. So are I haven't found it to go over there, but are we posting the meetings there or are they PSAs? What's there?
Yeah, at this point, they're really more PSAs, but we are aiming toward recording all council meetings, all planning board meetings, all zoning meetings, and all advisory committee meetings eventually. So what we hope to do is have one place where there's an archive of all public meetings for the town of South Kingstown. This is a pretty common thing. It's other municipalities have been posting things to YouTube for many years. We will also at some point go back and convert our clerk base recordings to YouTube, we hope, so that there is truly a one-stop shop for all public meetings, records of all public meetings. But as of right now, we're using it mostly for short PSAs, 30 to a minute long PSAs. As soon as we sort of get good at this, staff will be able to start recording the advisory meetings. And once we get good at the advisory meetings, we'll start doing posting of the planning board, the zoning, and eventually the town council. We don't want to move from a technology that is tried and true. The clerk-based technology has worked for us for many years, but eventually YouTube is probably where even clerk-base is going to be storing their video.
Councilman McEntee.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the possibility of increasing the number of members on the Board of Canvassers from 3 to 5. Is that something we can talk about and consider, Mike, without adding an agenda item?
No, you can add it to the agenda to discuss, but I'm going to have to check the law on that because I believe that's mandated by state law, but I would want to check that, Rory.
All right, you want to get back to us on that?
I can. Why don't we have it as an item for the next agenda?
Okay.
Unless Susan, you may know right off.
I believe you can have alternate members in addition to the 3 that we already have. We do have one of our members who is going to be up for reappointment in March, and we will be inviting her in to one of the soon to be upcoming meetings to be interviewed, as you have been doing for all reappointments. So it might tie in very well to that reappointment schedule to discuss having at least alternates, if not additional members. But yes, you're right, Mike. We do have to look at what the state law provides.
I will certainly do that, and I will have that for you for the next meeting.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Let's add that to the agenda for the next meeting.
Yes.
Any further comments for Rob? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to appointments, item 10.
Rory McEntee, I'll make a resolution appointing Maury Gates to the Historic District Commission.
Deborah Kelso, I'll second that.
From Councilman McEntee, a second from Councilwoman Kelso. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Any other appointments tonight?
Rory McEntee, I'll make a motion appointing Carol Vetter to the trustees of the South Kingstown School Funds.
Deborah Kelso, second.
We have a motion from Councilman McEntee, a second from Councilwoman Kelso. Discussion? Is there anyone opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Abel, if I may ask, there are 2 different terms expiring on the Historic District Commission. One is in December 2021 and the other is in December of 2023. Which do you want Mr. Gates appointed to?
December 2023.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, that takes care of appointments for tonight. That brings us to item 11, new business. 11B is a resolution adopting the town beach policy for the 2021 season, as shown on Exhibit 1 of the agenda. Further described in a memo from the Director of Leisure Services to the town manager dated February 2nd. I know there are some changes here in terms of fees. So I don't know if you want to cover that, Rob, or if you wanted to have Terry come in.
I can give the, high-level overview, and if you want to ask detailed questions, Terry is still here. So the big things that are changing, there's a $10 increase in the fees. We are not capping the number of seasonal passes, but we're restricting seasonal passes to residents. Outsiders can come in, non-residents can come in on day passes, but the seasonals are not going to be capped, so we won't have the same sort of rush on passes that we had last year.
Any questions from council on the speech policy, or do I hear a motion?
Rory McEntee, I'll make a motion to approve 11B.
Deborah Kelso, second.
A motion from Councilman McEntee, a second from Councilwoman Kelso. Is there any discussion on 11B? Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously, and it brings us to 11C, a resolution authorizing an award of bid to EW Audette & Sons of Providence for the purchase and installation of a new LED lighting system for Brousseau Park tennis courts in accordance with all bid specifications in an amount not to exceed $44,000, including a contingency of $2,200, further described in a memo from the park superintendent to the town manager dated January 28th.
Deborah
Rory-
Kelso, motion to approve item 11C.
Rory McEntee, I'll second that motion.
Motion from Councilman Kelso, second from Councilman McEntee. Is there discussion on this? Councilman Bergner?
Yeah, so I frequently see that park, so, and the lights work. Is this part of a regularly scheduled upgrade, or,
I don't believe that the lights are LED, but the truth is we should bring in Terry to make sure she can give you a full explanation. I think it's just the conversion to LED because it's more energy efficient.
There she is.
Good evening.
Terry?
To answer Councilwoman Bergner's question, yes, so this has been in the capital plan for several years now, and we in place of trying to replace the current fixtures, which would have cost a significant amount and they're not LED, we are looking to transfer over to LED lighting. We have had trouble with some of those fixtures previously in the past few years, so we would rather do a full replacement with the updated fixtures for these courts. They're heavily used regularly, and we're trying to transfer over basically through a cycle every park that has field lighting or courts that have lighting over to LED.
thank you. I do see people there all the time. And so I know that they're widely used, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All right, very good. Do I see anyone opposed to this motion? All right, very good. That motion carries unanimously. That brings us to 11D, resolution authorizing an award of contract to Woodard and Curran of Providence for Green Hill Pond, Factory Pond Stream, and Teal Pond Stream, TMDL and nitrogen reduction engineering services in an amount not to exceed $159,200, including a contingency of $30,000 with funding from the TMDL Capital Reserve Fund, and further detailed in a memo from the Public Services Director to the Town Manager dated February 4th. Rob, John, if you want to give us a little more background. I know we went over this during the capital improvement program, but freshen our memories.
I'll let John do the honors. He's been working this with the Friends of Green Hill Pond, so this has actually been quite a successful public-private partnership, if you will. John?
So Green Hill Pond is the next in queue for TMDL improvements. As you council may recall, we recently finished some in along the Narrow River and Narragansett Avenue East. So the goal is to try to treat stormwater before it enters the pond to reduce pollutant loading. There's a TMDL for fecal coliform in Green Hill Pond, of which the majority of that source is actually non-anthropogenic, and that is basically waterfowl and wildlife. So we're trying to capture the stormwater that's carrying that fecal matter from non-anthropogenic sources and treat it before it gets to the pond. That being said, I think I've said in the past with Narrow River, and I'll say it again, I'm a broken record. This will help reduce pollutant loading to the pond, but it's not going to solve it. So council needs to be aware that, once we expend the money for engineering and then go on and expend money for construction of stormwater improvements, it's going to help, but it's not going to solve the problem. And I think that's the rub with all the TMDLs in town. It's going to make an improvement, but it's not going to be like, my analogy is a bridge. We can repair a bridge and remove the weight, any weight restrictions. We can't do that with this. It's going to help, but it's not going to solve the problem. But we have a regulatory mandate that we have to meet, and we're to make these stormwater improvements, and that's what we're trying to chip away at over, many, many years. And I wanted to echo Rob. I wanted to thank the Friends of Green Hill Pond. They were instrumental this year in us getting a CNAP grant of $100,000. We applied twice before, and we're bridesmaids both times. And Friends of Green Hill Pond helped out and hired actually a consultant to submit a more robust application. So because of them, we were successful in getting the grant, and we've been working with them, and they're going to be participating in the the study process before we hit design and try to do public outreach with the people down around Green Hill Pond. So I just wanted to thank them. They've been very helpful in that regard.
John, and thank you, Rob. Do I hear a motion on 11D?
Rory McEntee, I'll make a motion to approve 11D.
Deborah Kelso, second.
We have a motion from Councilman McEntee, a second from Councilwoman Kelso. Any discussion? Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to 11E, resolution memorializing the General Assembly to enact legislation authorizing the town of South Kingstown to issue not to exceed $85 million in general obligation bonds, notes, and other evidences of indebtedness to finance the construction, renovation, improvement, alteration, repair, landscaping, furnishing, and equipping of schools and school facilities throughout the town, and all attendant expenses, including but not limited to engineering and architectural costs, provided that the authorization shall be reduced by the amount of certain grants received from state bond proceeds from the Rhode Island Department of Education and from the Rhode Island School Building Authority. Whereas, this is the language, the Town Council of the Town of South Kingstown endorses and supports the issuance of general obligation bonds, notes, and other evidences of indebtedness, finance the construction, renovation, improvement, alteration, repair, landscaping, furnishing, and equipping of schools and school facilities throughout the town, and all attendant expenses, including but not limited to engineering and architectural costs, in parentheses, the projects. Whereas, in order to undertake and complete the projects, there would be a need to issue bonds, notes, or other evidences of indebtedness in an amount not to exceed $85 million. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the town of South Kingstown hereby memorializes the General Assembly to enact legislation authorizing the town, with the approval of the qualified electors, to issue bonds, notes, or other evidences of indebtedness in an amount not to exceed $85 million for the above purposes, provided that the authorization shall be reduced by the amount of certain grants received from State of Rhode Island bond proceeds and the Rhode Island Department of Education or from the Rhode Island School Building Authority. Be it further resolved, the town solicitor, working with the bond counsel for the town of South Kingstown, ensure that the appropriate legislation in substantially the form shown on Exhibit 2 attached hereto is submitted in a timely manner to the Rhode Island General Assembly to ensure that all requirements are met to ensure consideration of this question by the electors. And be it further resolved that this resolution is an affirmative action of the town council of the town of South Kingstown toward the issuance of bonds, notes, or other evidences of indebtedness in accordance with the purposes of the laws of the state. This resolution constitutes the town's declaration of official intent pursuant to Treasury Regulation Section 1.150(2) to reimburse the town for certain capital expenditures for the projects said on or after the date, which is 60 days prior to the date of this resolution, but prior to the issuance of the bonds or notes. Such amounts to be reimbursed shall not exceed $85 million and shall be reimbursed not later than 18 months after A, the date on which the expenditure is paid, or B, the date the projects are placed in service or abandoned, but in no event later than the 3 years after the date the expenditure is paid. And be it further resolved, this resolution shall take effect upon its passage. Whew. All right.
Town council requires it, so.
All right. Do I hear a motion on this one?
Deborah Kelso, I'll make a motion to pass item 11E.
Rory McEntee, I'll second the motion.
We have a motion from Councilman Kelso, second from Councilman McEntee. Discussion. One thing, the question that comes to mind seeing this is, you know, what's getting submitted to the General Assembly for approval and authorization to put it on a referendum. When are we thinking about that referendum happening at this point? Or do we need to have that discussion now?
Yeah, so the schedule, as we understand it, is that RIDE has the application. That application was submitted a week or a little bit more than that perhaps ago. The process is for the Rhode Island Department of Education School Building Authority to review the application, to seek additional information if they need it, and then to form an opinion, a recommendation that will be submitted to the Council on Education. The Council on Education, so let me back up. The recommendation is formed in all likelihood in March. We will know what the School Building Authority has recommended in all likelihood in March. The Council on Education does not meet to formally accept or reject recommendations by the SBA until May. I think the date was May 17th, if I'm remembering correctly. So if you were to do a referendum in April, then you would be doing it based on the strength of the recommendation by the school building administration. When asked, the consultant who put this application together admitted that she had never seen a recommendation refused or turned down. So the SBA recommendation is a strong indication of the state's final action, but it is not technically the state's final action. The state's final action will not happen until May 17th. So if a referendum were to happen before May 17th, it would be based on the strength of the recommendation being made by the SBA. If the council wished to wait for the absolute final action by the state, that would have to be a referendum scheduled after the 17th of May. Such a referendum could happen in May or could happen at any time, I believe, any time under the language of the ordinance, a time to be set by the town council. Knowing that summer is probably not the best time to be doing referenda, probably would be either a May or September date, I would imagine. You could do April, but you're doing it on the strength of the SBA application or the SBA approval, the SBA recommendation for the state's action.
Councilwoman Berger.
It's not related to that topic, but it's related to the resolution. Is that okay? Okay. So in the stage 2, I had a question. It has the proposed financing plan. So my question is sort of simple, but sort of complicated. what is the amount that we'll be requesting for the bond? Because in the finance plan, it says the school general obligation bonds, parentheses, referendum 2021, 78,660,000.
Yeah. So we've actually got a meeting, just so happens, scheduled for sometime later this week with RIDE to make sure that we fully understand and appreciate what they're doing. Our CIP calls for $78 million worth of bonded debt to be taken on. That's based on an analysis of the RIDE regulations that say, if you've got an $85 million project, you're eligible for $7 million of upfront money from the state. So they're going to front end roughly seven. It's 6 point, I don't know what it is right off the top of my head, but $7 million.
6.340.
Thank you. So the question, becomes, is that $85 million the value of the project, or is that what your bonded authority has to be? We intend to take $78 million worth of bond indebtedness, because the $85 million project will be that plus the $6.3 million that the state will give us. That gets us to our total project cost. But you're right, it's a simple question that has a lot of nuance to it, and we want to just make sure that we're comfortable with the state and the state understands our interpretation of the regulation and that we're all on the same page. I will say again, though, our CIP and the application contemplates $78 million worth of indebtedness toward an $85 million project with $6.3 million worth of reimbursement from the state upfront to get us to the total project cost.
So a follow-up question is, so the amount is, you're asking us to approve an open-ended amount up to
$85 million. That's correct. But let me back up. I'm not asking you to go to the ballot question with $85 million. This is just asking the state for the authority to go up to 85. The ballot question and the timing of the referendum are still issues that the council will have to address.
But
at a future date, you will have to set the question and you will have to set the date for that question to be posed to the electors.
so my other question is about it. The language in the resolution is very vague, so it doesn't really dictate that it's indicated that this school facility stage 2 plan submitted February, whatever. So it's very vague. So you're basically saying borrow for a non-specific project, and it sounds like a blank check to me.
Except that it does say that the bond proceeds have to be reduced by the amount provided by the Rhode Island Department of Education. So it is tied to RIDE in that regard. Again, there's just steps in the process you have to go through. This language is, I don't want to call it boilerplate, but this is the language that Bond Council has produced for other school projects in the past that we've looked at, her previous resolutions. This is, again, boilerplate, but it's consistent with everything she's ever written for previous projects. I presume this is the acceptable form in the legislature, and that this resolution is acceptable to the IRS, and that this form is acceptable to the purchasers of bonds. Everyone who wants to know the history, the legislative history of a bond issuance will look at this resolution and say, yes, that's an appropriate resolution. That's why it's drafted the way she's drafted it, I'm sure.
I agree with that, but for our community, the project isn't outlined. It isn't tied to this project. So it is really giving open-ended bonds to any school project?
No, well, no. All this resolution does is say, go put legislation before the state legislature and seek the authority to issue up to $85 million worth of bonds. This does not give anyone the authority to actually issue bonds. This is not, the voters still have to decide whether or not to give any bonding authority. And the council has to decide what bonding authority to ask the voters to give. You've not done that yet. You have to set the amount and you have to set the time at a future date. This is simply looking for the authority to go to 85 from the state legislature.
So is this coming back to us with an amount?
This will not come back to you. The question is a question that you will have to draft at a future meeting.
Wait, you cut out right at that point. So we will not decide what the amount is at,
You will have to decide, the council will have to decide what the question is, which will include the amount, and when the question will be put to the voters. Those are two steps that you still have to go through. They're actually probably done at with one resolution, but those are still two things that you have to do after this. You have to be given the authority to take the next step, and then your next step is what's the question and what's the date.
so one more. So what's the reason for doing this now? Why couldn't we wait 3 weeks and see what RIDE says?
Because what you do if you miss the legislature and you don't have the authority is you don't have the ability to proceed. You couldn't then just come up with a date and a question because you don't have that authority. The state legislature has to tell you, yes, you may proceed. This is just asking, may we proceed?
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
Mike, did I screw that up in any way? I just want to make sure I get that perfectly right because this is important.
No, and I would have jumped in, Rob. You are exactly right. We need to get, any municipality needs to obtain General Assembly approval for a bond. Whether or not the municipality then decides to act on that legislation is up to the municipality. This is just what's called enabling legislation. We need it in many other contexts also, but it's still up to the council. It doesn't mean you have to, although it's probably what the council will do given everything to this point, but legally, the enabling authority is just that. The council will still have to vote on in an amount and an election date, et cetera. So it will come back to another public hearing. But if you don't get the enabling legislation, you're foreclosed from even setting it up. So yeah, you had it right.
I just don't want to mislead anybody. It's too important.
Thank you both. Any further discussion on this item? Right, Susan, maybe take the roll on this one.
Okay, and don't get nervous. I just discovered that under Robert's rules, you should be called last as the president on a roll call vote.
That's
I will call this alphabetically, beginning with Councilwoman Bergner.
Oh, nay, sorry. No, nay.
Okay. Where am I going next? Councilwoman Kelso.
Aye.
Council Vice President McEntee.
Aye.
Councilwoman Rose.
Aye.
And Council President Collins.
Aye.
The motion carries 4-1.
Thank you. And that brings us to 11F, a resolution authorizing the town clerk to advertise for order of notice a public hearing relative to proposed amendments to the town code, Chapter 17, taxation, Article 3, property tax exemptions for elderly persons, Section 1743, applications for tax exemption to contain evidence of eligibility. This is just an order of notice, so I will not read all the changes here, but they look like good ones. Rob, did you want to speak briefly on
Just
that?
one thing, there's a lot of strikeouts and additions. I just want to make sure the council understands. All we're doing here is changing the eligibility criteria from mandated to evidence of. We had in our old ordinance, it just said that you had to be registered to vote in order to be eligible for a senior tax abatement. We've just made that, we will look for the evidence, and one of the things that we'll look for is whether you're registered to vote. What's important is that you're a resident, not a citizen. So we just wanted to make sure that, you know, we were not raising a challenge to the ordinance because of its discrimination against property owners who don't happen to want to vote or can't register to vote because of their status as non-citizens or legal aliens or what have you. And then the other thing that's going on with this is last year we adjusted the tax credits, but we did not change the income brackets. We are moving the income brackets up to come closer to inflationary increases over the last 20 years. We're not entirely there, but this does begin to move us in the right direction on what the income brackets are and the associated tax credit.
All right, very good. Do I hear a motion on item 11F?
Rory McEntee, motion to approve 11F.
Deborah Kelso, second.
You have a motion from Councilman McEntee, second from Councilwoman Kelso. Any discussion? Is there anyone opposed? Oh, Councilwoman Berger. You are muted at the moment.
I can't click both sides. How will we get the word out to the community that this has changed? Do you have a plan for that?
Well, this is just a notice of a public hearing.
Okay.
This will be published in the newspaper, and we'll put it up on the website. That's typically how we notice these things. Maybe we'll get Jean Bouchard to do a YouTube video. Not that that's necessarily going to get a lot of folks, but it might. I mean, the answer really is it's public notification through the newspaper of record.
I think what Councilwoman Berger, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Deb, but was asking if we pass the changes, are people going to get notifications that, you know, their eligibility is changed or anything? We can talk about it during the public hearing.
We don't have income data. You know, there's no way for us to know. We don't even have, I mean, I suppose we could mail something to every senior in town, but it would be, you know, probably 7,000 to 8,000 mailings for us to do that. And many, maybe not most, but many of those folks are simply not going to be eligible because they have incomes that are too high. I don't know the answer, to be honest with you. I don't know how we'd get everybody.
Something that you can, oh, sorry. So let me raise my hand.
Go ahead.
Is it something that you could put in a tax bill in July? Is it, I didn't know how people, and then I also didn't know, like, changing the income limits, how many people would participate and what is the cost to increase that?
Yeah, so the answer to the first question is July would be too late because the program requires that they make the application either before December 1st or in December. So it's early, it's before the beginning of the next fiscal year, which makes sense because you have to have some sense of, you have to know how many exemptions you're going to give so that you can make the adjustment to your tax rate. You have to know that in December. Otherwise, you can't budget around the reduced taxes in that area. So that's not going to do it. In terms of what the total expense of the program is, we don't know, which is why we've been doing this incrementally. We've been trying to do this gradually because we don't know what this is going to do. We do know that we have not made income adjustments for 20 years. So we know that inflation has eroded the numbers on this table. We don't know what adjustment is going to do. So we're moving them slowly and not bringing them up all at once. Again, it's a function of the limited information we have. We don't have income data on individual households.
All right, thank you, Rob. Any further discussion on 11F? I think we had a motion in a second, if I remember going. Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. And that brings us to the end of the public items. We do have item 12, a closed executive session. At this point, so I'm going to ask somebody to make a motion that we move into closed executive session. For everybody who's stuck around and watched our meeting, thank you for sticking around. Unfortunately, you can't watch us in closed executive session.
So
Susan,
Deborah
we
Kelso,
sent-
I'll make a motion that we move into closed executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5A2 for discussion and possible vote on pending litigation, Anderson versus Wojciechowski et al. Do I need to read the number as well? WC-2013-0048.
Rory McEntee, I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Is there anyone opposed to this motion? All right, that motion carries unanimously. So I think we can all sort of leave this meeting and then re-enter it later. Is that our process that we've come down to?
Susan, the address, the executive session room, it's been emailed to everyone?
Yes, it has. Did everyone receive that? Okay, so you're going to leave this meeting. Then you are going to log into the second link that you were provided in the email from Colleen, and that will encompass a meeting of just this group. After that is completed, you will adjourn back to regular session, and we will have to rejoin this meeting link for the regular session in order to do that. Anybody have any questions on that?
Susan, has that email been sent to Zach? Because I'd like Zach to attend this session.
It was
It's,
not Colleen, but I will send it to Zach right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So while we are in closed executive session, as you can see, Colleen has put up a notification in the town of South Kingstown square that will tell people that you are currently in closed executive session. So we're not actually going to close this session. We're just going to recess to the other Zoom account in order to hold it confidentially. Okay,
We have to leave this meeting, correct? We
you
can't.
do have to leave this meeting, I believe, yes. Okay.
Alrighty. So now, Mike, do you want to tell us that motion?
So are you going to make a motion to close the executive session, to seal the minutes, and to reconvene into public session?
Rory McEntee, I'll make that motion.
Second. Deb
we have a
Berger,
mo-
second. Sure.
Thank you. Motion from Councilman McEntee, a second from Councilman Bergner. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. That
And
brings us-
Susan, the minutes have to reflect that no motion was taken in executive session. And now, Abel, you'd have a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, do I hear that motion?
Rory McEntee, motion to adjourn.
Deb Bergner, second.
Motion from Councilman McEntee, second from Councilman Berger. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you all for participating again. Good to get through our first closed executive session together. We'll be doing that again. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.